The morning mist clung to the granite peaks of Grand Teton National Park, like a shroud, whispering secrets that only the mountain could keep. On August 3, 2023, a young woman named Amy Turner stepped onto a trail that would lead her into one of the most perplexing disappearances in American wilderness history. She carried with her the confidence of someone who had conquered these paths before, the precision of military upbringing, and a waterproof journal that would later reveal words so chilling they would haunt investigators for months. Amy never returned from that hike. For 11 long months, her name echoed through the canyons and across online forums, becoming a ghost story whispered around campfires and a mystery that consumed her family's every waking moment. Search teams scoured over 40 square miles of unforgiving terrain. Dogs followed phantom scents that led nowhere. Helicopters swept valleys that seemed to swallow sound itself. Then, on a routine wildlife survey in June 2024, a park ranger named Clay Morano spotted something that shouldn't have been there. A flash of red fabric caught in the massive nest of a golden eagle 2,000 feet above the canyon floor. What he found woven into that nest of twigs and bones would unravel everything investigators thought they knew about Amy Turner's disappearance and raise questions that still echo through the wilderness today. Before we dive into this story that will challenge everything you believe about what's possible in the wild, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell, because what you're about to hear is a mystery so strange, so impossible that you won't want to miss a single detail. Amy Elizabeth Turner was not the type of person who simply vanished. At 24 years old, she possessed the kind of methodical precision that comes from growing up in a Navy family, where structure wasn't just encouraged, it was survival. Born in the misty hills of Oregon and raised across various military bases, Amy had learned early that preparation meant the difference between life and death. Her friends from college often described her as quietly intense, the kind of person who would spend hours researching a restaurant before making a reservation, who kept detailed spreadsheets of her hiking gear, and who never ever deviated from a plan without telling someone first. Even her decision to leave her successful graphic design career in Portland seemed calculated, purposeful, deliberate. Amy didn't do anything without thinking it through 3 times. Her mother, Patricia Turner, would later tell investigators she was the child who packed her school bag the night before, who had backup plans for her backup plans. The idea that she just disappeared, it goes against everything she. Amy had moved to Jackson Hole, Wyoming in the spring of 2022, drawn by what she called the honest brutality of the mountain. While her college friends were climbing corporate ladders and posting Instagram photos from trendy restaurants, Amy was documenting wildlife behavior and learning to read weather patterns in the clouds that gathered around the Teton Peak. By the summer of 2023, she had become something of a fixture in the local hiking community. Rangers at Grand Teton National Park knew her by name. Other solo hikers sought her advice. She had logged more than 900 miles on Teton trails, each hike meticulously documented in a series of waterproof notebooks she kept stacked beside her bed. She wasn't just hiking for recreation, said Marcus Chen, a fellow hiker who had encountered Amy multiple times on the trail. She was studying the mountains like they were a language she was trying to learn. She knew which eagles nested where, which streams ran strongest in different seasons, even which rocks were most likely to be loose after rainfall. Amy's reputation among the ranger staff was impeccable. She never littered, always signed permits properly, and had twice assisted in search operations for less experienced hikers who had gotten themselves into trouble. Her wilderness skills were so solid that several rangers had jokingly suggested she apply for a position with the Park Service. Amy Turner was the last person we'd expect to see in a missing person report, said Chief Ranger Sarah Martinez, who had personally signed off on dozens of Amy's backcountry permits. She was careful, experienced, and smart. If Amy disappeared, it wasn't because she made a mistake. On the evening of August 2, 2023, Amy sat at the small wooden desk in her Jackson Hole apartment, surrounded by topographical maps, weather forecasts, and the kind of detailed notes that would have impressed a military strategist. She was planning what should have been a routine 4-day solo loop through some of her favorite sections of Grand Teton National Park. The route she outlined in her hiking journal was one she had completed successfully twice before: String Lake to Paintbrush Canyon, then along the Paintbrush Divide to Cascade Canyon, with planned camping spots she had already scouted and GPS coordinates she had tested with multiple devices. Her handwriting in that final planning entry was neat, precise, confident. August 3-6, 2023. String Lake to Paintbrush Canyon. Day 1. String Lake to Paintbrush Canyon campsite, approx 6.2 miles. Day 2. Paintbrush Divide crossing to Cascade Canyon. Day 3. Explore side canyons. Base camp. Day 4. Return via Jenny Lake 7.1 miles. Weather forecast clear. Gear checked twice. Emergency contacts update. She had written her mother's phone number in 3 different places and set up her Garmin GPS device to send automated check-in messages every evening at 7:00 p.m. sharp. Amy even included a note about which protein bars she was packing and how much water she planned to carry, down to the ounce. The level of detail was typical Amy, but it would later become crucial evidence that whatever happened to her was not part of any plan she had made. At 5:47 a.m. on August 3rd, Amy's neighbor Janet Rodriguez saw her loading her silver Subaru Outback in the pre-dawn darkness. Janet, an early riser who was tending to her garden, later told police that Amy had waved and called out, "See you Sunday evening." She seemed completely normal, Rodriguez recalled. Happy, even. She was wearing that red fleece jacket she always wore on hikes, had her hair braided back the way she always did. Nothing seemed off. Nothing at all. Amy arrived at the String Lake trailhead at 6:32 a.m., according to park entry records. The parking area was nearly empty, just Amy's Subaru and 2 other vehicles belonging to photographers, hoping to catch the sunrise over the lake. She signed the trail register at 6:45 a.m., her signature clear and unhurried. A. Turner, solo, 4 days, Paintbrush Cascade Loop. The temperature that morning was a perfect 52 degrees Fahrenheit, with unlimited visibility and no wind. Weather conditions couldn't have been better for hiking. Amy shouldered her 35-pound pack, adjusted her trekking poles, and disappeared into the forest along a trail she had walked dozens of times before. 3 other hikers would later report seeing Amy that first day. All described her as appearing relaxed and confident, moving at her typical steady pace, stopping occasionally to consult her map or make notes in the small notebook she always carried in her chest pocket. The last confirmed sighting was at approximately 3:20 p.m., when day hikers James and Linda Morrison encountered Amy near the approach to Paintbrush Canyon. She was sitting on a boulder drinking water and writing in a notebook. James Morrison told investigators, "We chatted for maybe 5 minutes about the trail conditions ahead. She said she was planning to camp near Holly Lake, maybe a quarter-mile further up. She seemed perfectly fine, confident, prepared, happy to be out there." That evening at exactly 7:12 p.m., Amy's Garmin device sent its scheduled check-in message to her mother's phone. Day 1, complete. Beautiful sunset. All good. Love you. It was the last communication anyone would ever receive from Amy Turner. Patricia Turner stared at her phone screen, watching the digital clock flip from 9:29 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. on August 4th. For 24 years, her daughter had never been late to check in. Not one. Even as a teenager sneaking out to meet friends, Amy would somehow manage to text exactly when she said she would. Now, as the minutes ticked past Amy's scheduled 7:00 p.m. check-in time, Patricia felt a cold dread settling in her stomach that had nothing to do with the evening air conditioning in her Portland home. By 9:30 p.m., Patricia had left 3 voicemails on Amy's phone. By 10:00 p.m., she was pacing her living room, alternating between staring at her phone and refreshing Amy's GPS tracking app, which showed no new location data. By 11:00 p.m., she was on the phone with Grand Teton National Park's emergency line. "Ma'am, we understand your concern," the dispatcher told her, "but one missed check-in isn't necessarily cause for alarm. Your daughter is an experienced hiker, and GPS devices can malfunction. We'll make a note in our system, but our official missing person protocols require 24 hours before we initiate a search." Patricia didn't sleep that night. She sat in Amy's childhood bedroom, surrounded by hiking magazines and photographs of mountain peaks, staring at her phone and praying for a message that never came. At 6:07 a.m. on August 5th, exactly 35 hours after Amy's last communication, Patricia called the Park Service again. This time, they listened. Chief Ranger Sarah Martinez arrived at the String Lake trailhead at 7:45 a.m. on August 5th, leading a preliminary search team of 4 rangers and 2 volunteer search and rescue specialists. The morning was crisp and clear, with perfect visibility, ideal conditions for both hiking and searching. Amy's silver Subaru sat exactly where she had left it 2 days earlier, undisturbed and locked. A quick look through the windows revealed nothing unusual. A pair of street shoes on the passenger floor, a coffee cup in the center console, a gas receipt from Jackson dated August. The trail register showed Amy's signature from 2 days prior, and her planned route was exactly what her mother had described. Everything appeared normal, routine, planned. At that point, we were expecting to find her with a broken GPS device, or maybe nursing a minor injury. Martinez later recalled, Amy Turner wasn't the kind of hiker who got into trouble. We figured we'd have her back to the trailhead by afternoon. The search team made good time up the Paintbrush Canyon Trail, following Amy's planned route toward her intended campsite near Holly Lake. The trail was dry, well marked, and showed normal signs of foot traffic from the busy summer hiking season. At 11:47 a.m., they found her camp. Amy's campsite was located exactly where she had planned it, a level spot among lodgepole pines, about 50 yards off the main trail, and hidden from view by a cluster of granite boulders. It was a perfect wilderness campsite, protected from wind, close to a reliable water source, and positioned to catch the morning sun, but everything about the scene felt wrong. Amy's tent was still standing, properly staked and tensioned, with the rainfly secured against weather that had never come. The tent door was zipped shut, just as it should be to keep out wildlife and insects. But when Ranger Martinez unzipped the door and looked inside, she found a camp that looked like its owner had stepped away for just a moment. Amy's sleeping bag was unrolled but not slept in, still fluffed and positioned exactly as if she had just finished setting it up. Her cookpot sat beside her camp stove, containing what appeared to be half-finished rehydrated lentils, now cold and congealed. Her spoon was still in the pot. Her headlamp sat on top of her sleeping bag, positioned where someone would place it for easy nighttime access. Her toiletries were arranged, range-D, on a flat stone beside the tent. Her extra clothes were folded in a stuff sack at the foot of her sleeping bag. Most unsettling of all was Amy's journal, lying open beside her sleeping bag to an entry dated August 3rd. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, neat and precise. Reached camp 4:45 p.m. Good water source 30 yards northeast. Weather holding clear. Dinner cooking. Tiered legs but good spirits. Tomorrow, early start for Paintbrush Divide. Beautiful spot photos tomorrow. The entry ended mid-sentence, her pen still lying beside the notebook as if she had been interrupted while writing. It looked like she had just stood up and walked away, said Ranger Tom Bradley, who was part of the initial search team. Everything was exactly where it should be, except Amy wasn't there. As the search team inventoried Amy's campsite, they began to notice what wasn't there. Amy's hiking boots were gone, so was her day pack, a lightweight Osprey pack she used for day hikes and water run. Her rain jacket, which she typically kept in the day pack, was also missing, but what she had left behind was equally puzzling. Her GPS unit sat in the tent's gear loft, fully charged and functional. Her bear spray hung from a carabiner attached to the tent's guy line, exactly where wilderness safety protocols dictated it should be. Her first aid kit was untouched in the tent's vestibule. Most mysteriously, her wallet containing $2047 in cash, and her driver's license, was still in her pack. Her car keys were in an interior pocket. Her emergency whistle hung on its lanyard from the tent's peak. If Amy had decided to leave voluntarily, she would have taken her wallet and keys, Martinez noted in her incident report. If she had been attacked by wildlife, there would have been signs of struggle and her bear spray would likely have been deployed. If she had fallen or been injured, her GPS device would have been with her for emergency communication. Instead, they had a campsite that looked like its occupant had simply evaporated. While part of the search team processed Amy's campsite, Ranger Bradley began looking for tracks leading away from the camp. Given Amy's systematic nature and the soft soil around the area, he expected to find a clear trail showing which direction she had gone. He found footprints almost immediately, boot prints matching the tread pattern Amy typically wore, leading west from her campsite toward a rocky ridge that overlooked Cascade Canyon. The prints were clear in the soft earth near the camp, showing Amy's characteristic measured stride. Bradley followed the trail for approximately 300 yards, watching the prints traverse a meadow and begin climbing toward a narrow ledge that jutted out over the canyon. The tracks showed no signs of distress, no stumbling, no indication that Amy was running or being chased. Then, at the edge of a granite outcropping, the footprints simply stopped. It was like she walked to the edge of that rock and just disappeared. Bradley later told investigators, the rock was solid granite, maybe 20 feet across. I searched every inch of it. No scuff marks, no blood, No sign that she had slipped or fallen. The prints led right to the edge of that rock, and then there were no more prints. Below the outcropping was a steep, but not vertical slope, covered in loose scree and scattered boulders. If Amy had fallen or jumped, there should have been disturbed rocks, torn vegetation, or some sign of impact. Instead, the slope showed no signs of recent disturbance. Bradley called for assistance, and within an hour, 3 additional searchers were rappelling down the slope below the outcropping, looking for any sign that Amy had fallen. They found nothing. "I've been doing search and rescue for 15 years, Bradley said later. "People don't just disappear. There's always something, a piece of clothing, disturbed vegetation, blood, if there's been an injury." But Amy's trail just ended. As the search team expanded their investigation around Amy's campsite, Ranger Jessica Park made a discovery that would haunt everyone involved in the case. About 300 yards from Amy's tent, nestled in a small clearing between 2 massive pine trees, Park found something that didn't belong: a careful arrangement of wild white columbines, laid out in a precise pattern on a flat granite stone. The flowers were fresh, picked within the last day or two. They were arranged in what appeared to be a deliberate pattern: 7 flowers in a circle, with 1 flower placed in the center. Beside the arrangement, catching the afternoon sunlight, was a single silver earring. Amy's mother would later confirm that the earring was indeed her daughter's, part of a pair she had worn habitually for years. But why would Amy have removed her earring and left it beside a flower arrangement in the middle of the wilderness? It felt intentional, Park recalled. Not like something that had been dropped or lost, but placed there deliberately. The flowers were arranged too carefully to be random, and the earring was positioned like it was meant to be found. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. Was there some kind of message from Amy? Had someone else been at the campsite? Was there a significance to the specific arrangement of flowers that searchers weren't understanding? As the sun began to set on August 5th, the search team established a base camp near Amy's tent, planning to expand their search area at first light. They had found her campsite, her belongings, and evidence that she had walked away under her own power, but they were no closer to understanding where Amy Turner had gone, or why her trail ended in the middle of solid rock, with no explanation. The mountain was keeping its secrets, and Amy Turner had become part of them. By dawn on August 6, what had begun as a routine search for an overdue hiker had transformed into one of the largest wilderness search operations in Grand Teton National Park's recent history. Word of Amy's disappearance had spread through the tight-knit hiking community, and volunteers were arriving at the String Lake trailhead faster than organizers could process them. Chief Ranger Sarah Martinez found herself coordinating a search effort that now included 23 professional search and rescue personnel, 41 trained volunteers, 2 search dog teams from Jackson Hole Search and Rescue, and a helicopter crew from Teton County Sheriff's Department. Amy Turner wasn't just popular with other hikers, Martinez explained to the assembled search teams during their morning briefing. She was respected. People felt invested in finding her, because she was the kind of person who would have been first in line to help if someone else had gone missing. The search area was divided into grid sections, with teams assigned to cover specific quadrants of the rugged terrain surrounding Amy's last known location. The strategy was methodical, comprehensive, and designed to account for the possibility that Amy might have become disoriented and wandered far from her planned route. But as the hours passed, the systematic search was revealing the same thing over and over: nothing. Search dog teams arrived on the morning of August 6, bringing 2 highly trained tracking dogs and 1 specialized cadaver dog. The handlers, experienced professionals who had assisted in dozens of wilderness recoveries, were confident they would quickly pick up Amy's trail and follow it to wherever she had gone. The first dog, a German shepherd named Ranger, was given one of Amy's hiking shirts from her tent to establish scent. Within minutes, Ranger was following Amy's trail with obvious confidence, leading his handler along the same path that human searchers had traced the day before. The dog followed Amy's scent through the meadow, up the slope toward the granite outcropping where her footprints had ended. But when Ranger reached the rock formation, his behavior changed dramatically. The dog became agitated and confused, reported handler Mike Stevens. He kept circling the rock, whining, acting like the scent was there but somehow wasn't. "I've never seen Ranger behave like that." Stevens tried multiple approaches, circling the area, starting from different points, even having the dog rest and starting fresh an hour later. Each time Ranger would follow Amy's scent to the granite outcropping, then lose it completely. The second tracking dog, a bloodhound named Sadie, produced identical results. Both dogs were certain Amy had reached that rock formation, but neither could pick up her scent continuing in any direction from that point. In 12 years of search and rescue work, I've never had both dogs lose a scent trail at exactly the same point with no explanation, Stevens told investigators. Scent doesn't just disappear. Even if someone gets into a vehicle or crosses water, there are usually trace scents that dogs can follow. But it was like Amy's scent just stopped. The Teton County Sheriff's helicopter began systematic aerial sweeps on the morning of August 7th, equipped with both standard optical equipment and thermal imaging cameras capable of detecting body heat from significant distances. Pilot Sarah Chen had extensive experience flying search missions in the mountainous terrain around Jackson Hole. Over the course of 3 days, she and her crew flew a grid pattern, covering more than 60 square miles of wilderness, paying particular attention to canyon bottoms, hidden valleys, and cliff faces where an injured hiker might have ended up. We covered every ravine, every hidden meadow, every place where someone could possibly be, Chen reported. The thermal imaging equipment is sensitive enough to detect a small animal from 500 feet up. If Amy had been anywhere in that search area, alive or deceased, we would have found her. The helicopter crew also photographed every section of terrain they surveyed, creating a comprehensive visual record that would later be analyzed by additional teams. Those photographs showed pristine wilderness, undisturbed vegetation, and no signs of human presence anywhere within the search grid. By August 8th, search organizers were running out of conventional places to look. That's when they called in a specialized team of technical climbers and rope rescue specialists to access areas that ground teams couldn't safely reach. The climbing team, led by experienced mountaineer David Park, focused on cliff faces, narrow canyons, and the kinds of vertical terrain that might have trapped an injured hiker. Over 2 days, the climbers rappelled into every significant drop-off within 5 miles of Amy's campsite. We checked places that would be physically impossible for someone to reach without technical climbing equipment, Park explained. Narrow ledges hundreds of feet down cliff faces, boulder caves that you'd need ropes to access, even eagle nests, and other wildlife areas. We were being thorough to the point of absurdity. The climbers found nothing, no clothing, no equipment, no sign that any human had ever been in those remote locations. As the official search entered its second week, the area being covered had expanded to encompass nearly 80 square miles of some of Wyoming's most challenging terrain. Teams had searched dense forests, alpine meadows, rocky peaks, and hidden valleys. They had covered terrain that ranged from well-maintained trails to areas so remote that search teams were likely the first humans to set foot there in decades. The search had evolved from looking for a missing hiker to looking for any clue that might explain what had happened to Amy Turner. Searchers were now checking areas that Amy couldn't possibly have reached in the time she had been missing, operating on the theory that perhaps she had become disoriented and traveled much farther than initially thought. But the expanded search revealed the same thing the initial search had found: absolutely nothing. We had covered enough terrain to account for every reasonable possibility, Martinez said in her final search report. If Amy had fallen, become lost, been injured, or even died somewhere in that wilderness, we should have found some trace of her. The fact that we found nothing at all was, in itself, extremely troubling. As the physical search continued, investigators began exploring alternative theories about what might have happened to Amy Turner. Each theory was systematically examined and ultimately eliminated. Grand Teton National Park is home to black bears, grizzly bears, and mountain lions, all potentially dangerous to solo hikers. However, Amy's bear spray was still hanging untouched at her campsite. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, no scattered gear that would indicate a wildlife encounter. Additionally, Amy was known to be extremely careful about food storage and wildlife safety. The technical climbing teams had thoroughly searched every cliff face and drop-off within miles of Amy's location. Helicopter crews had used thermal imaging to scan canyon bottoms and hidden valleys. No trace of Amy or her gear had been found anywhere she could have fallen. Amy was in excellent physical condition, with no known medical issues. Even if she had suffered a sudden medical emergency, her GPS device and emergency whistle were still at her campsite, and she would have had no reason to walk away from her camp while experiencing a medical crisis. Amy had left behind her wallet, car keys, identification, and nearly all of her possessions. She had no history of mental illness, no financial problems, and no relationship issues that might motivate a voluntary disappearance. Her family and friends uniformly described her as stable, happy, and excited about her hiking plans. The campsite showed no signs of struggle or disturbance. Amy's valuable gear was untouched. The remote location made it unlikely that she would have encountered another person with criminal intent. Additionally, her footprints leading away from camp showed her walking calmly and normally, not running or being forced. Every conventional explanation for Amy's disappearance failed to account for the physical evidence, or the complete lack thereof. On August 20th, after 17 days of intensive searching, Grand Teton National Park officials made the difficult decision to scale back the active search for Amy Turner. More than 200 professional and volunteer searchers had covered hundreds of square miles of wilderness. Search dogs, helicopters, technical climbers and thermal imaging equipment had all been deployed extensively. The official search had consumed more resources than any single missing person case in the park's recent history, and it had produced absolutely no evidence of what had happened to Amy Turner. The decision to scale back was one of the hardest I've ever had to make, Chief Ranger Martinez said at a press conference announcing the change in status. Amy Turner deserved every effort we could make to find her, and her family deserved to know that we had done everything possible. But after 17 days of intensive searching, we had to acknowledge that continuing the same search methods was unlikely to produce different results. The case was reclassified as an unresolved wilderness disappearance, a category reserved for the rare cases where experienced hikers vanish without leaving any recoverable trace. Amy Turner had officially become a mystery. While the official search was scaling back, Amy's family was just getting started. Patricia Turner, Amy's mother, took a leave of absence from her job in Portland and moved temporarily to Jackson Hole, determined to keep looking for her daughter when the authorities could. I understand why the Park Service had to scale back their search, Patricia said in an interview with local news station KTWO. They have limited resources and other responsibilities. But Amy is my daughter. I can't just stop looking for her because other people have given up. Patricia organized private search parties, hired private investigators, and consulted with psychics, geologists, and anyone else who might have insights into where Amy could have gone. She posted flyers in every business in Jackson Hole, maintained social media accounts dedicated to Amy's case, and coordinated with online communities that specialized in missing person cases. The private searches continued throughout the fall of 2023, but they produced the same results as the official searches: nothing. As winter snow began to cover the high country of Grand Teton National Park, making further searching impossible, Patricia faced the reality that her daughter had vanished as completely as if she had never existed. Amy Turner's case joined the small but haunting collection of wilderness disappearances that defy explanation. People who walk into the mountains and simply cease to exist, leaving behind only questions and the kind of mystery that keeps investigators awake at night. But the mountain wasn't finished with Amy Turner's story yet. Ranger Clay Morano had been looking forward to his wildlife survey assignment for weeks. June 2024 had brought perfect weather to Grand Teton National Park, clear skies, moderate temperatures, and the kind of pristine mountain air that reminded him why he had chosen to work in the wilderness. His assignment that morning was routine, documenting golden eagle nesting patterns in the Cathedral Group, a cluster of dramatic peaks above Lake Solitude. The work was methodical, requiring him to hike to various observation points and record the locations and behaviors of the massive raptors that made their homes on the towering cliff faces. At 42 years old, Morano had spent 18 years working as a park ranger, and he had developed the kind of patience that comes from understanding that nature reveals its secrets slowly, to those willing to wait and watch carefully. He had started his hike at 5:30 a.m., reaching the first observation point as the sun crested the peaks and began illuminating the rocky spires and deep valleys below. The morning was spectacular, golden light painting the granite faces, the sound of distant waterfalls and the occasional cry of eagles echoing from the height. By 9:45 a.m., Morano had documented 3 active eagle nests, and was working his way toward a 4th location when something caught his eye that shouldn't have been there. High above Lake Solitude, perched in a massive ponderosa pine that clung to what seemed like an impossible angle on the cliff face, was one of the largest golden eagle nests Morano had ever seen. The nest was enormous, easily 6 feet across and built up over many seasons of years. Through his binoculars, he could see the typical collection of materials that eagles used in construction: large sticks, strips of bark, and the bleached white bones of prey animals. But wedged among the natural materials was something that made Morano stop and adjust his binoculars for a clearer look. A bright splash of red fabric that was unmistakably synthetic. At first I thought it might be trash that had blown up there somehow, Morano later recalled. Maybe a piece of a balloon or some kind of litter that had gotten caught in the wind. But the more I looked at it, the more it looked like clothing. The nest was positioned approximately 200 feet above the canyon floor, in a tree that would require technical climbing skills to access safe. Golden eagles are fiercely protective of their nests during breeding season, and the location was so remote and challenging that it was unlikely any climber would have attempted to reach it. But the red fabric was definitely there, and it was definitely not a natural material. Morano spent 20 minutes studying the nest through binoculars, trying to determine if what he was seeing warranted calling for backup. The red material appeared to be substantial, not just a small piece of litter, but what looked like it might be part of a jacket or other substantial piece of clothing. At 10:15 a.m., he radioed for assistance. By 2:30 p.m. that same day, a technical rescue team had assembled at the base of the cliff below the eagle nest. The team included 2 experienced climbers, a wildlife specialist, to ensure the eagles weren't harmed, and a photographer to document whatever they might find. Lead climber Jake Martinez, no relation to Chief Ranger Sarah Martinez, had been rappelling and climbing in the Tidons for more than a decade. He had accessed dozens of eagle nests for research purposes, and was familiar with the challenges of working around the powerful bird. Golden eagles are incredibly protective of their nests, Martinez explained as he prepared his climbing gear. They can have a wingspan of 7 feet and talons strong enough to crush bone. We had to be extremely careful not to threaten them or their offspring. The climb to reach the nest took nearly an hour, with Martinez ascending a complex route that involved both technical rock climbing and careful maneuvering around the tree that held the nest. As he got closer, he could see that the red material was indeed substantial, what appeared to be a fleece jacket, tightly woven into the nest structure. But as Martinez reached the nest itself, he realized that the red jacket was not the only foreign material the eagles had incorporated into their construction project. Working carefully to avoid disturbing the eagles, or their nesting area, more than absolutely necessary, Martinez began documenting what he found, woven into the massive nest. What he discovered would send shockwaves through the investigation into Amy Turner's disappearance. The red fleece jacket was substantial, clearly an adult-sized piece of clothing that had been torn into several large pieces and woven throughout the nest structure. The fabric was weathered, but not deteriorated to the degree that would be expected if it had been exposed to the elements for a full year. But the jacket was only the beginning. Embedded in the nest materials, Martinez found a folded photograph, water-damaged but still recognizable, showing a young woman with dark hair, standing next to an older woman, in what appeared to be a family portrait. A second silver earring that perfectly matched the one found near Amy's campsite. A plastic zipper pull bearing a small map symbol, and the logo of a popular hiking gear manufacturer. Several strips of nylon fabric that appeared to come from a lightweight backpack. A small plastic bag containing what looked like trail mix. Each item was carefully removed and photographed in place before being secured in evidence bags for later analysis. I've been climbing for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this, Martinez said after completing the recovery operation. Eagles do collect unusual materials for their nests sometimes, but this was different. It was like they had specifically gathered items from one source. Within 48 hours, the items recovered from the eagle nest were being analyzed by forensic specialists in the Wyoming State Crime Lab. The results would prove even more mysterious than the discovery itself. The red fleece jacket was confirmed to be the same brand, size and color as the one Amy Turner had been wearing when she disappeared. Fabric analysis showed that it matched samples taken from Amy's other clothing at her campsite. The photograph was positively identified by Patricia Turner as a picture of Amy and herself taken during a hiking trip the previous summer. The silver earring was an exact match to the one found near Amy's campsite, and both were confirmed by Patricia to be part of a pair that Amy wore regularly. The zipper pull was traced to the same manufacturer and model of day pack that Amy had been carrying when she disappeared. But the most puzzling result came from the analysis of how long the items had been exposed to the element. Based on weathering patterns, UV exposure, and other environmental factors, these items had been exposed to outdoor conditions for no more than 6 to 8 weeks. the forensic report concluded. They had not been exposed to a full winter season, or the kind of long-term weathering that would be expected if they had been in the nest since August. The implication was staggering. Amy Turner's belongings had somehow made their way into a golden eagle nest, nearly 10 months after her disappearance. But they had only been there for a few weeks. The discovery in the eagle nest raised more questions than it answered, and each question seemed to lead to possibilities that defied logical explanation. How had Amy's clothing and personal items ended up in an eagle nest 2,000 feet above the ground? Golden eagles are powerful birds, capable of carrying prey weighing up to 15 pounds. But they don't typically scavenge clothing or personal items. Even if an eagle had somehow acquired Amy's jacket, how had it transported a substantial piece of clothing to a nest that would require technical climbing skills for a human to reach? Where had the items been for the previous 10 months? The forensic analysis was clear that they had not been exposed to a full year of outdoor conditions. If Amy had disappeared in August 2023, and her belongings had only been in the eagle nest for 68 weeks before their discovery in June 2024, where had they been for the intervening month? Why were only certain items present? Amy had been carrying a day pack, containing multiple items when she disappeared, but only specific pieces. A jacket, photograph, earring and zipper pull had been found in the nest. Where were her boots, her pack, and the other items she had been carrying? Most disturbing of all, if Amy's belongings were being moved around nearly a year after her disappearance, what did that imply about Amy herself? The discovery in the eagle nest prompted Grand Teton National Park to reopen the active search for Amy Turner. If her belongings were surfacing in impossible locations nearly a year after her disappearance, there was renewed hope that Amy herself might still be found. A new search team was assembled, this time focusing on the area around Lake Solitude and the Cathedral Group where the eagle nest had been located. The search was smaller than the massive effort mounted immediately after Amy's disappearance, but it was conducted with the same thoroughness and attention to detail. Search teams spent 5 days combing the terrain around the eagle nest, looking for any additional clues about how Amy's belongings had ended up there. They searched every accessible ledge, every hidden canyon, every place where someone or something might have stored or cached Amy's gear before it somehow made its way to the eagle nest. They found nothing. The area around the eagle nest showed no signs of human presence, no footprints, no disturbed vegetation, no indication that anyone had ever been in the remote and challenging terrain below the massive bird's nesting site. News of the eagle nest discovery spread quickly through social media and outdoor recreation communities. Amy Turner's case, which had been gradually fading from public attention, suddenly became the subject of renewed interest and speculation. Theories proliferated online. Some suggested that Amy had been killed and her body hidden, with scavengers gradually dispersing her belongings. Others proposed that she had suffered from some form of mental break and was living as a hermit in the wilderness, occasionally discarding personal items. A few even suggested supernatural explanations for how her belongings could appear in impossible locations. But none of the theories could adequately explain the forensic evidence. Amy's belongings had only been exposed to the elements for a few weeks, not the nearly 11 months since her disappearance. As summer 2024 progressed, wildlife biologists began studying the behavior of the golden eagles, whose nest had yielded such disturbing evidence. Dr. Jennifer Park, an ornithologist from the University of Wyoming, was granted permission to conduct a detailed study of the nest site and the eagles' foraging patterns. What she discovered added another layer of mystery to Amy Turner's case. Golden eagles typically forage within a 5 to 10 mile radius of their nest. Dr. Park explained in her research report, they're powerful flyers, but they don't typically travel vast distances to acquire nesting material. Whatever these eagles had collected, they had found it relatively close to their nesting site, but the area within a 10-mile radius of the eagle nest had been thoroughly searched multiple times during the original investigation into Amy's disappearance. If her belongings had been in that area in August 2023, they should have been found by the search teams. Dr. Park also noted something unusual about the eagles' behavior. Most golden eagles that incorporate foreign objects into their nests do so randomly, picking up whatever catches their attention during foraging flight. But the items from Amy Turner's belongings were all substantial pieces that would have required significant effort for the eagles to transport and incorporate into their nest. It was almost like they had been presented with a collection of items to choose from. The eagles, it seemed, had been given Amy Turner's belongings by someone or something, But by whom? And why? The mountain was revealing its secrets slowly, piece by piece, but each revelation only made the mystery of Amy Turner's disappearance more impossible to understand. 3 days after the Eagle Nest revelations sent shockwaves through the investigation, search teams made another discovery that would prove even more disturbing than the first. This time it wasn't found 200 feet above the ground in an impossible location. It was buried just beneath the surface of the earth, waiting to be found. On June 17, 2024, searcher David Chen was working a grid pattern on the slope below the Eagle Nest when his metal detector picked up a faint signal. After nearly a year of fruitless searching, Chen had learned not to get excited about metal detector hits. They usually turned out to be old cans, lost tent stakes, or natural mineral deposits that registered on the equipment. But this signal was different. It was consistent, localized, and at the exact depth that suggested something had been buried deliberately, rather than lost accidentally. Chen called for backup before beginning to dig. Within an hour, 2 additional searchers and a forensic photographer had arrived to document whatever might be found, using small tools and brushes to preserve any evidence. The team began carefully excavating the site. 18 inches below the surface, wrapped in a waterproof dry bag that had kept its contents perfectly preserved, they found Amy Turner's personal journal. The discovery of Amy's journal created an immediate problem for investigators. According to the original search reports, Amy's journal had been found in her tent on August 5, 2020. It had been photographed, catalogued, and stored as evidence in the initial investigation. But now, nearly 11 months later, searchers had found what appeared to be the same journal buried in the wilderness, and this version contained entries that had never been seen before. Chief Ranger Sarah Martinez was called to the scene to examine the journal personally. As she carefully opened the waterproof bag and removed the familiar brown leather notebook, she immediately recognized Amy's handwriting, and the same careful, precise style of documentation that had characterized all of Amy's hiking journals. But the final entries in this journal were dated August 5 and 6, 2023. Days after Amy had disappeared, and days after her original journal had supposedly been found in her tent. Either we found 2 identical journals, Martinez wrote in her incident report, or the journal we found in Amy's tent was not actually the journal she had been writing in when she disappeared. The final entries in the journal were written in Amy's unmistakable handwriting, but they described experiences that seemed impossible to reconcile with the physical evidence of her disappearance. August 5, 2023. Morning. Something is wrong. I went to sleep in my tent last night, but I woke up this morning on a rocky ledge maybe a quarter mile from camp. I have no memory of moving. My boots are gone. I don't understand how I got here or why I would have left my campsite in the middle of the night without my boots. The sun is in the wrong position. Based on where I went to sleep and where I woke up, I should be able to see my tent from here, but I can't. It's like the landscape changed during the night. August 5, 2023. Afternoon. I found a trail that isn't on any of my maps. It's well maintained, clearly used regularly, but it doesn't appear on the topographical maps or the Park Service trail guides. The trail markers are different too, not the standard Park Service signs I'm familiar with. I've been following this trail for 3 hours. It should have led me back to familiar territory by now, but I keep finding landmarks that don't match anything I recognize. I found a stream that flows uphill for about 50 yards before resuming normal flow. That's not possible. August 5, 2023. Evening. I can hear things in the forest that aren't animal sounds, not human voices either, but something else. Rhythmic sounds, almost like machinery, but organic. And there are lights moving through the trees that aren't flashlights or lanterns. I left my other earring on a rock cairn I built. If anyone finds it, they'll know I was still okay at that point. I'm leaving this journal buried near the cairn in case something happens to me. August 6, 2023. I don't think I'm in the same place anymore. The mountains look different. The peaks are the same shape, but the way the light hits them is wrong, and there are things watching me from the tree line. Not animals. I can see their eyes reflecting light, but they're too high off the ground to be any animal I know. I keep finding my own footprints in places I know I haven't been. Fresh prints, like I walked through those areas just minutes before, but I have no memory of being there. The trail keeps going even when it should. I followed it to what should have been a cliff edge, but the trail continued down a slope that wasn't there yesterday. I don't know where this leads. If you're reading this, tell my mom I love her. I'm not afraid. Final entry. August 6, 2023. I can hear the mountain breathing. The journal was immediately sent for forensic analysis, and the results only deepened the mystery surrounding Amy Turner's disappearance. Handwriting experts confirmed that every entry in the journal had been written by Amy Turner. The ink was consistent throughout, and the paper showed the kind of wear patterns that would be expected from normal use during a hiking trip. But the most puzzling result came from the analysis of the ink and paper aging. The entries dated August 5th and 6th appear to have been written on the dates indicated, the forensic report concluded. Based on ink analysis, paper aging, and other factors, these entries were written approximately 11 months ago, consistent with the dates written in the journal. The implication was staggering. Amy Turner had apparently been alive and writing in her journal for at least 2 days after she had supposedly disappeared, and she had been experiencing things that seemed to defy the laws of physics and geography. Amy's journal entry mentioned building a rock cairn where she had left her other earring. Given that searchers had found one of Amy's earrings near her original campsite and the matching earring in the eagle nest, the discovery of a third earring would have significant implications for understanding her disappearance. A new search effort was organized specifically to look for the cairn Amy had described building. Using the journal entries as a guide, searchers focused on rocky areas within a reasonable distance of where the journal had been buried. The search for the cairn lasted 4 days and involved teams of searchers working in grid patterns across challenging terrain. They found dozens of natural rock formations and several old cairns built by previous hikers to mark routes, but none that appeared to match Amy's description. On the 4th day of searching, Ranger Tom Bradley found something that stopped him cold, a rock cairn that was clearly recent, built with the kind of precision and attention to detail that matched Amy's personality. But when the cairn was carefully dismantled, there was no earring to be found. Instead, nestled among the rocks at the base of the cairn, searchers found a small plastic bag containing a handwritten note. The mountain took it back. The note was written on a piece of paper torn from Amy's journal, the same paper and ink that had been confirmed as authentic in the forensic analysis. The handwriting was unmistakably Amy's, but the message was unlike anything else she had ever written. The mountain took it back was accompanied by a crude map showing what appeared to be a trail system that didn't match any known topography in Grand Teton National Park. The map showed landmarks that didn't exist, a lake shaped like a crescent moon, a waterfall that flowed upward, and a peak marked with a symbol that looked like an eye. Below the map, Amy had written, "For those who follow the trail that isn't there." By late June 2024, the investigation into Amy Turner's disappearance had accumulated more questions than answers. Physical evidence was appearing in impossible locations nearly a year after her disappearance. Her personal journal contained entries describing experiences that seemed to contradict the laws of nature, and each new discovery only made her fate more mysterious. FBI specialists were brought in to consult on the case, bringing expertise in complex missing person investigations and forensic analysis. After reviewing all the evidence, their assessment was stark. The Amy Turner case presents physical evidence that is internally consistent, but externally impossible. Special Agent Maria Rodriguez wrote in her consultation report, "Either Turner experienced events that challenge our understanding of natural law, or we are dealing with an elaborate hoax of unprecedented sophistication." But the hoax theory fell apart under scrutiny. The forensic evidence was too consistent, the timeline too complex, and the logistical challenges too great for any human agency to have fabricated the evidence that was being found. Throughout the discovery of new evidence, Patricia Turner maintained her vigil in Jackson Hole, coordinating with investigators and continuing her own private search efforts. The discovery of Amy's journal had given her renewed hope that her daughter might still be alive somewhere, but it had also introduced possibilities that were almost too strange to contemplate. "Part of me wants to believe that Amy is still out there somewhere," Patricia said in an interview with investigators, "but the Amy I knew was the most logical, practical person I've ever met. The idea that she would write about streams flowing uphill and trails that appear and disappear, it's like reading about a completely different person." Patricia had hired private investigators, consulted with geologists about unusual cave systems in the area, and even reached out to paranormal investigators who claimed experience with unusual disappearances. But every avenue of investigation led to the same conclusion. Amy Turner had encountered something in the wilderness that didn't fit into any normal category of human experience. As summer 2024 progressed, The Amy Turner case had become a source of fascination and speculation throughout the outdoor recreation community and beyond. The case had all the elements of a classic mystery: an experienced hiker who vanished without a trace, physical evidence that appeared in impossible locations, and written accounts that seemed to describe experiences beyond the realm of normal reality. But despite intensive investigation by multiple agencies, despite the application of cutting-edge forensic techniques, and despite the discovery of Amy's personal belongings and journal entries, the fundamental questions about her disappearance remained unanswered. Where was Amy Turner? How had her belongings ended up in locations that seemed impossible to reach? What had she experienced during the days after her disappearance that led her to write about landscapes that defied geography and phenomena that challenged natural law? And most disturbing of all, was Amy still out there somewhere, in a place that existed beyond the boundaries of the maps that claimed to chart every square mile of Grand Teton National Park? The mountain had been giving up its secrets slowly, piece by piece, but each revelation only made it clear that the mountain was keeping the most important secret of all: what had really happened to Amy Turner, and where she had gone when she walked off the edge of the world. As news of Amy Turner's case spread through online communities dedicated to missing person cases, investigators began noticing a disturbing pattern. Amy's disappearance was not unique. It was part of a cluster of similar cases that had been occurring in national parks across the American West for decades. David Paulides, a former police detective who had been documenting unusual disappearances in national parks for years, reached out to Grand Teton investigators in July. His research had identified more than 400 cases of experienced hikers and outdoors enthusiasts who had vanished under circumstances that defied conventional explanation. The Amy Turner case fits a very specific profile, Paulides explained in a consultation with park investigators. Experienced outdoors person, solo hiker disappears near water sources or geological features, minimal or no trace evidence found, despite extensive searches, and often followed by discoveries of personal belongings in locations that seem impossible. Similar cases had occurred in Yosemite, Yellowstone, Olympic National Park, and dozens of other wilderness areas. In each case, the missing person was someone with extensive outdoor experience who vanished despite being well prepared and following established safety protocols. Dr. Sarah Chen, a geologist from the University of Colorado, who specialized in the geological history of the Rocky Mountains, was brought in to consult on Amy's case in August. Her area of expertise was unusual geological formations and underground cave systems that might not be documented in standard topographical surveys. After spending 3 weeks studying the terrain around Amy's disappearance site, Chen made a discovery that added yet another layer to the mystery. The area where Amy Turner disappeared sits on top of one of the most geologically complex underground systems in North America, Dr. Chen reported. There are limestone caverns, underground rivers, and geological formations that extend for miles beneath the surface. Some of these formations create acoustic anomalies that could explain the breathing sounds Amy described in her journal. Chen's ground-penetrating radar had identified what appeared to be a vast underground chamber system directly beneath the area where Amy had last been seen. The chambers were too deep to access safely, but they extended in directions that didn't match any known cave systems in the area. It's possible that there are entrances to these underground systems that haven't been discovered or mapped, Dr. Chen concluded. If Amy had somehow fallen into one of these systems, it could explain why her body was never found, and why her belongings might surface in unexpected locations as underground water systems move them around. But even Dr. Chen's geological theory couldn't explain how Amy's belongings had ended up in an eagle nest 2,000 feet above the ground, or why her journal contained entries written after her disappearance. In September 2024, investigators took an unprecedented step. They consulted with representatives of the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes, whose ancestors had lived in the Teton region for thousands of years before it became a national park. Tribal elder Robert Crow Feather, who served as a cultural liaison between the tribes and the National Park Service, listened carefully to the details of Amy's case before offering his perspective. There are places in these mountains that our people have always known to avoid, Crow Feather explained. Places where the spirits of the land are different, stronger, places where people can walk in during the day and not come back, or come back. According to Crow Feather, tribal oral history included numerous accounts of people who had vanished in the Teton area, often near the same geographical features where modern disappearances occurred. Your missing woman, She wrote about hearing the mountain breathing, crow feathers. Our ancestors spoke of places where the earth itself was alive, where the boundary between this world and others was thin. We always taught our children to stay away from such places, especially when traveling alone. The tribal perspective introduced possibilities that conventional investigators hadn't considered, that Amy Turner might have encountered something in the wilderness that existed outside the boundaries of conventional reality. Dr. Jennifer Park, a forensic psychologist specializing in wilderness psychology and the mental effects of isolation, was asked to review Amy's journal entries to determine if they might indicate a psychological break or mental health crisis that could explain her behavior. After analyzing the writing style, content and progression of Amy's journal entries, Dr. Park reached a conclusion that surprised everyone involved in the investigation. Amy Turner's journal entries show no signs of psychological distress, delusional thinking or mental breakdown, Dr. Park reported. Her writing remains clear, logical, and internally consistent throughout. Even when describing impossible events, she writes about them in the same practical observational style that characterizes all her other journal entries. Dr. Park noted that people experiencing wilderness-induced psychological breaks typically showed specific patterns in their writing: deteriorating handwriting, increasingly disorganized thoughts, and a growing disconnection from reality. Amy's entries showed none of these characteristics. If Amy Turner was experiencing a psychological crisis, it was unlike any that I've encountered in my professional experience, Dr. Park concluded. Her journal reads like the account of someone who was observing and documenting unusual phenomena, not someone who was losing touch with reality. In October 2024, Dr. Michael Torres, a theoretical physicist from Stanford University, who specialized in the study of space-time anomalies and dimensional physics, was asked to review the Amy Turner case from the perspective of cutting-edge theoretical science. Dr. Torres' analysis focused on Amy's descriptions of geographical impossibilities, streams flowing uphill, trails that led to different destinations each time they were followed, and landscapes that seemed to change overnight. While these phenomena seem impossible from the perspective of classical physics, Dr. Torres wrote in his consultation report, they are consistent with theoretical models of localized space-time distortions, or dimensional interfaces, that some physicists have hypothesized might exist in areas of unusual geological or electromagnetic activity. Dr. Torres noted that the Teton region sits on a complex intersection of geological fault lines and has unusual electromagnetic properties due to its mineral composition. According to his theoretical models, such conditions might create what he termed reality anomalies, areas where the normal laws of physics operate differently. I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that dimensional portals or parallel universes are the explanation for Turner's disappearance, Dr. Torres emphasized. But from a purely theoretical standpoint, the phenomena she described are consistent with some of the most cutting-edge theories in modern physics. In November 2024, just over a year after Amy Turner's disappearance, Grand Teton National Park organized what officials announced would be the final comprehensive search for Amy and any additional evidence related to her case. This search was different from all previous efforts. Instead of focusing on conventional search techniques, the team included geologists with ground-penetrating radar, electromagnetic specialists with equipment designed to detect underground anomalies, and even physicists with instruments capable of measuring localized variations in gravitational and electromagnetic fields. The search lasted 2 weeks and covered not just the surface terrain where Amy had disappeared, but also attempted to map and understand the underground geological systems that Dr. Chen had identified. The results were inconclusive but unsettling. We found evidence of underground chambers and water systems that extend much further than our initial surveys had indicated, reported Dr. Chen. Some of these systems appear to connect with surface features in ways that don't match our geological models of how such formations typically develop. Most mysteriously, the electromagnetic specialists detected what they described as anomalous field variations in several locations near Amy's disappearance site. Areas where electromagnetic readings fluctuated in patterns that couldn't be explained by known geological phenomena. We're seeing electromagnetic signatures that resemble what we might expect from high-energy physics experiments, reported Dr. Lisa Park, the electromagnetic specialist. But these readings are occurring naturally, in the middle of the wilderness, with no apparent source. As 2024 drew to a close, The Amy Turner case had consumed more investigative resources than any missing person case in Grand Teton National Park's history. Federal agencies, university researchers, tribal representatives, and private investigators had all contributed their expertise to trying to understand what had happened to a young woman who had simply walked into the mountains and vanished. The case had accumulated physical evidence that challenged conventional understanding, personal belongings that appeared in impossible locations, journal entries that described experiences beyond normal reality, and geographical anomalies that seemed to defy the laws of physics. But despite all the investigation, all the advanced technology, and all the expert analysis, the fundamental questions about Amy Turner's disappearance remained unanswered. Where was Amy Turner? What had she encountered in the wilderness that led her to write about impossible phenomena? How had her belongings traveled from wherever she had gone to locations that seemed impossible to reach? And most disturbing of all, was Amy still somewhere in those mountains, in a place that existed beyond the boundaries of conventional reality? In December 2024, Patricia Turner made the difficult decision to hold a memorial service for her daughter, acknowledging that Amy might never be found or return. The service was held at String Lake, where Amy had begun her final hike more than a year earlier. But the memorial was attended not just by Amy's family and friends, but by dozens of other families whose loved ones had vanished in similar circumstances across America's national parks. What had begun as a memorial for one missing hiker became an acknowledgement of a pattern of disappearances that seemed to exist outside the boundaries of conventional explanation. Amy was not the first person to walk into these mountains and never come back, Patricia said at the memorial service, and I fear she won't be the last. But maybe by talking about what happened to her, by sharing the unspeakable things we've discovered, we can help other people understand that there are places in this world that don't follow the rules we think we know. A plaque was installed at the String Lake trailhead, not just commemorating Amy Turner, but serving as a warning to future hikers, in memory of Amy Turner and others who have walked into the wilderness and encountered the impossible. The mountains keep their secret. Travel with caution, stay together, and remember that not all trails lead to places that appear on maps. Today, more than a year after Amy Turner disappeared into the wilderness of Grand Teton National Park, her case remains officially unsolved. Her family continues to hope for answers. Investigators continue to follow up on occasional reports of unusual findings in the wilderness, and the mountain continues to keep its secrets. But Amy's story has changed how we think about the wilderness, and the possibility that there are places in our world where the normal rules don't apply. Her case has joined the ranks of truly unexplained disappearances, mysteries that challenge our understanding of what's possible, and force us to consider that there might be more to our world than we can comprehend. The journal entries Amy left behind paint a picture of someone who encountered something impossible, and tried to document it with the same careful precision she brought to everything else in her life. Her final words, "I can hear the mountain breathing," suggest that she had discovered something about the wilderness that most of us never see, something that exists in the spaces between what we know and what we fear might be true. Every year, thousands of people hike the trails where Amy Turner disappeared. Most of them return safely, carrying memories of beautiful scenery and peaceful solitude. But a very few, report experiences that don't quite fit into the normal categories of wilderness encounter. Sounds that don't match any known animal, trails that seem to lead to different destinations than they did the day before, landscapes that don't quite match the topographical map. These reports are usually dismissed as misperceptions, fatigue-induced hallucinations, or simple mistakes in navigation. But in the context of Amy Turner's case, they take on a different significance. They suggest that the impossible things Amy wrote about in her journal might not have been unique to her experience. What happened to Amy Turner? Did she fall into an undiscovered cave system and die alone in the darkness? Did she suffer some kind of psychological break and wander into the wilderness to die? Did she encounter another person with harmful intention? Or did she walk into a place where the normal rules of reality don't apply? A place where streams can flow uphill, and trails can lead to destinations that don't exist on any map. The truth is that we may never know what happened to Amy Turner, but her story serves as a reminder that there are still places in our world that remain mysterious, still corners of the wilderness that we don't fully understand, and still possibilities that exist beyond the boundaries of what we consider normal. The next time you walk alone into the wilderness, remember Amy Turner. Pay attention to the sounds around you. Notice if the landscape seems different from what you expect, And if you hear something that sounds like the mountain breathing, perhaps it's time to turn around and head back to the world where the rules make sense. Because some trails once followed lead to places from which there is no return, and some mountains keep their secrets forever. What do you think happened to Amy Turner? Did she encounter something in the wilderness that challenged the boundaries of reality? Or is there a more conventional explanation for her disappearance that investigators have overlooked? Could there be places in our national parks where the normal laws of physics don't apply? Places where experienced hikers can walk in during daylight and never return? Let us know your theories in the comments below. But remember, not every mystery has a solution, and not every trail leads back to the world we know. If this story has captivated you, if it's made you question what's possible in the places we think we understand, then hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications, because we tell the stories that others won't touch, the mysteries that challenge everything we think we know about our world. And sometimes the most important stories are the ones that remind us that there are still places in this world where anything is possible, even things that shouldn't be.